How did you find out someone had a crush on you? Story 1. The countdown to my move across the country had begun. 3 weeks left, then 2, and now just days separating me from a future that felt as thrilling as it was uncertain. I was heading to a new city for a promising job opportunity. The kind of career leap I'd dreamed about for years. Yet, as the reality of leaving settled in, so did the bittersweet weight of goodbyes. One of those goodbyes loomed larger than the rest. Her, Sarah. We had been friends for years, bound together by shared experiences, countless conversations, and an easy, unspoken understanding that had always felt rare. I never labeled what I felt for her, mostly because it felt too complicated, too risky, and, if I was honest, too improbable. It was a cool Friday evening when we decided to hang out. It wasn't a special occasion. No farewell party or dramatic send-off. Just the two of us in her cozy apartment, the way we'd done countless times before. Sarah had always been effortless. Barefoot, her dark hair tied in a messy bun, wearing an oversized sweatshirt that somehow looked perfect on her. Movie night or TV series marathon? She asked, plopping down on the couch beside me. I shrugged. Dealer's choice. You know I'm easy. Her smirk was instant, the kind of teasing look she reserved just for me. You're indecisive, not easy. Same thing, I countered, grinning as she rolled her eyes and picked something for us to watch. A familiar anime series we'd both loved since college. As the first episode played, our banter faded into comfortable silence. The glow of the TV cast shadows on her face, and I found myself watching her more than the screen. I knew I shouldn't. This wasn't the time to acknowledge what had always simmered under the surface between us. In just a few days, I'd be gone. What good would it do to open a door that would immediately close again? But then, out of nowhere, the words tumbled out. If I weren't moving so far away. Quote. She glanced at me, curious but quiet, waiting for me to finish. I hesitated, my heart pounding in a way that felt almost audible. If I weren't moving so far away, I repeated. I probably would have asked you out. For a moment, the only sound was the faint dialogue from the TV. Her expression shifted, not surprised, but something else. Thoughtful? Relieved? Yeah? She said softly, her voice almost hesitant. Yeah, I admitted, forcing a small smile. But, you know, timing's never been my strong suit. She nodded slowly, her eyes searching mine in that piercing way she always had, as if she were reading a page of a book I didn't know I'd written. Finally, she said, well, if you had, I probably would have said yes. The words settled between us like a secret finally spoken, equal parts weighty and freeing. I felt my chest tighten, not with regret, but with the ache of possibilities that would never be. The moment passed, and we slipped back into our usual rhythm. But something had undeniably changed. Later that night, we moved to her bedroom, sprawling out on the bed like we always did during late-night hangouts. The show played in the background, but neither of us seemed to pay it much attention. At one point, Sarah got up to use the bathroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I stretched my arms across the bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying the conversation in my head. I'd said it, she'd said it, but what now? When she returned, she stopped in the doorway, her head tilting as she noticed my exaggerated sprawl. Ooh, an arm, she teased, her voice light and familiar, bringing me back to the present. Take it or leave it, I shot back. Grinning, she laughed, climbing back onto the bed and settling beside me. Our shoulders brushed, and for a fleeting second, I considered saying more, telling her how much I'd miss her, how often I'd imagined something more between us, and how badly I wished the timing were different. But the words stayed lodged in my throat. Instead, we stayed there, side by side, until the early hours of the morning, the TV long forgotten. Story 2. We were carpooling back from a weekend trip with friends. I was in the driver's seat, focusing on the winding roads, while Emma sat beside me, scrolling through her phone. The rest of the group had left in another car, so it was just the two of us for the 3-hour drive home. About halfway through, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Emma turned off the music and said, "Can I tell you something?" Quote, I glanced at her, her expression unreadable. Of course. She hesitated, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I've had a crush on you for, well, a while now. I nearly swerved off the road. Wait, what? Quote, I know, she said quickly, her cheeks flushing. This is a terrible time to say it. I just figured, you know, if I don't tell you now, I might not ever say it. For the next few miles, the only sound was the hum of the engine. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. You really like me? I finally asked, glancing at her. Emma laughed nervously. Yeah, sorry if this makes things weird. By the time we pulled into her driveway, I'd made up my mind. I turned to her, took a deep breath, and said, I think I like you too. The relief on her face was unmistakable. That night, we talked for hours, parked in her driveway, until the stars faded into dawn. Story 3. I've always loved the quiet of libraries. It was my refuge during college. A place where I could escape into books and pretend the world outside didn't exist. That's where I met Liam. We were both regulars at the same table near the tall windows that overlooked the courtyard. He'd nod politely every time we made eye contact, and I'd return the gesture before burying my head in textbooks. Slowly, over months, those nods turned into small talk. He'd ask about what I was studying, and I'd ask him about his. It was casual, easy, and unremarkable, or so I thought. One rainy afternoon, I arrived late to our usual spot. To my surprise, Liam was already there, saving my seat with a book. I wasn't sure if you'd show, he said, closing his laptop. I laughed, setting my bag down. Late, but reliable. That's me. He didn't smile the way he usually did. Instead, he looked down at his hands, fidgeting with the edge of a notebook. What's up? I asked, noticing his unease. Liam took a deep breath, his words coming out in a rush. I don't know if this is weird to say, but I like you. I really like you. For a moment, I just stared at him, caught completely off guard. The library seemed to grow quieter, the rain outside the only sound. You like me? I repeated dumbly. He nodded, his cheeks turning pink. Yeah, I know we're just friends. Library friends. But I thought, I should say something before it's too late. I didn't know what to say, my mind racing between the surprise of his confession and the realization that I might feel the same. But I didn't respond right away. Instead, I smiled nervously and said, thanks for telling me. The next few weeks were awkward. Liam gave me space, and I spent a lot of time thinking. Then, one day, I showed up with coffee for two and a note that simply read, let's talk. That conversation changed everything. We've been sharing the same table and life ever since. Story 4. It was 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed. I groggily picked it up, squinting at the screen. It was Ava, my best friend. Hey, I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. What's going on? Quote, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice unusually shaky. Is everything okay? I sat up, suddenly wide awake. She hesitated, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I like you. I think I've liked you for a long time. But I was scared to say anything because I didn't want to ruin what we have. Her words hit me like a freight train. I'd known Ava for years. And while we were incredibly close, I'd never imagined she felt that way. My heart raced as I tried to process what she'd just said. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say whatever you feel, she whispered. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. I've never thought about us like that, Ava, but maybe I should have. There was a long pause. Maybe? Quote, maybe we should see where this goes, I said finally. Her quiet laugh was a mix of relief and nerves. Okay, let's take it slow. That night, we made a promise. To be honest, no matter where it led us. Over time, it led to something neither of us could have imagined. Story 5. It was the last day of high school, and everyone was busy signing yearbooks, taking photos, and saying goodbyes. I was cleaning out my locker when I found it. A folded piece of paper tucked into the back. My name was written on the outside. The handwriting familiar but unplaceable. Curious, I opened it and began to read. I don't know if you've ever noticed me, but I've noticed you. I've always admired the way you're so kind to everyone, even people who don't deserve it. I'll miss seeing you every day. Maybe someday, we'll cross paths again, and I'll have the courage to tell you all this in person. Until then, I just wanted you to know. There was no signature, but as I read and reread the note, a name formed in my mind. I looked around the crowded hallway, hoping to see her one last time. I didn't find her that day, but years later, at a coffee shop in our hometown, I saw her again. I bought her coffee, handed her the note I'd kept all this time, and said, let's cross paths properly this time. Story 6. We were at the airport, and she was leaving for a semester abroad. I'd come to see her off, carrying her bags and cracking jokes to keep things light, but as we stood near the security gate, the weight of her departure began to settle over us. I'm going to miss you, she said, her voice softer than usual. You'll barely have time to think about me, I teased. You'll be too busy exploring and living the dream. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You don't get it, do you? Quote, I frowned, confused. Get what? Quote, she stepped closer, her gaze locking with mine. I like you. I have for a long time. I thought maybe you felt the same, but you never said anything. Her words hung in the air between us. The announcement for her flight crackled over the speakers. Final boarding call. Quote, I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say you'll be here when I get back, she said, her voice trembling, and I promised I would be. When she returned months later, it was to a bouquet of sunflowers and the beginning of something we both had waited far too long to. Admit. Subscribe for more content.